Day 119. 1 Kings 6-7. In the 480th year after the Israelites had come out of the land of Egypt, in the month of Ziv, the second month of the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, he began to build the house of the Lord. The house that King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. The portico at the front of the main hall of the temple was 20 cubits long, extending across the width of the temple and projecting out 10 cubits in front of the temple. He also had narrow windows framed high in the temple. Against the walls of the temple and the inner sanctuary, Solomon built a chambered structure around the temple, in which he constructed the side rooms. The bottom floor was 5 cubits wide, the middle floor 6 cubits, and the third floor 7 cubits. He also placed offset ledges around the outside of the temple, so that nothing would be inserted into its walls. The temple was constructed using finished stones cut at the quarry, so that no hammer or chisel or any other iron tool was heard in the temple while it was being built. The entrance to the bottom floor was on the south side of the temple. A stairway led up to the middle level, and from there to the third floor. So Solomon built the temple and finished it, roofing it with beams and planks of cedar. He built chambers all along the temple, each 5 cubits high and attached to the temple with beams of cedar. Then the word of the Lord came to Solomon, saying, "As for this temple you are building, if you walk in my statutes, carry out my ordinances, and keep all my commandments by walking in them, I will fulfill through you the promise I made to your father David. And I will dwell among the Israelites and will not abandon my people Israel." So Solomon built the temple and finished it. He lined the interior walls with cedar paneling from the floor of the temple to the ceiling, and he covered the floor with cypress boards. He partitioned off the 20 cubits at the rear of the temple with cedar boards from floor to ceiling to form within the temple an inner sanctuary, the most holy place. And the main hall in front of this room was 40 cubits long. The cedar paneling inside the temple was carved with gourds and open flowers. Everything was cedar, not a stone could be seen. Solomon also prepared the inner sanctuary within the temple to set the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord there. The inner sanctuary was 20 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 20 cubits high. He overlaid the inside with pure gold, and he also overlaid the altar of cedar. So Solomon overlaid the inside of the temple with pure gold, and he extended gold chains across the front of the inner sanctuary, which was overlaid with gold. So he overlaid with gold the whole interior of the temple, until everything was completely finished. He also overlaid with gold the entire altar that belonged to the inner sanctuary. In the inner sanctuary he made 2 cherubim, each 10 cubits high, out of olive wood. One wing of the first cherub was 5 cubits long, and the other wing was 5 cubits long as well. So the full wingspan was 10 cubits. The second cherub also measured 10 cubits, both cherubim had the same size and shape, and the height of each cherub was 10 cubits. And he placed the cherubim inside the innermost room of the temple. Since their wings were spread out, the wing of the first cherub touched one wall, while the wing of the second cherub touched the other wall, and in the middle of the room their wingtips touched. He also overlaid the cherubim with gold. Then he carved the walls all around the temple, in both the inner and outer sanctuaries, with carved engravings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. And he overlaid the temple floor with gold in both the inner and outer sanctuaries. For the entrance to the inner sanctuary, Solomon constructed doors of olive wood with 5-sided doorposts. The double doors were made of olive wood, and he carved into them cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers and overlaid the cherubim and palm trees with hammered gold. In the same way he made 4-sided doorposts of olive wood for the sanctuary entrance. The 2 doors were made of cypress wood, and each had 2 folding panels. He carved into them cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and he overlaid them with gold, hammered evenly over the carvings. Solomon built the inner courtyard with 3 rows of dressed stone and 1 row of trimmed cedar beams. The foundation of the house of the Lord was laid in the 4th year of Solomon's reign, in the month of Ziv. In his 11th year and 8th month, the month of Bul, the temple was finished in every detail and according to every specification. So he built the temple in 7 years. Solomon, however, took 13 years to complete the construction of his entire palace. He built the house of the Forest of Lebanon 100 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, with 4 rows of cedar pillars supporting the cedar beams. The house was roofed with cedar above the beams that rested on the pillars, 45 beams, 15 per row. There were 3 rows of high windows facing one another in 3 tiers. All the doorways had rectangular frames, with the openings facing one another in 3 tiers. Solomon made his colonnade 50 cubits long and 30 cubits wide, with a portico in front of it and a canopy with pillars in front of the portico. In addition, he built a hall for the throne, the hall of justice, where he was to judge. It was paneled with cedar from floor to ceiling. And the palace where Solomon would live, set further back, was of similar construction. He also made a palace like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had married. All these buildings were constructed with costly stones, cut to size and trimmed with saws inside and out from the foundation to the eaves, and from the outside to the great courtyard. The foundations were laid with large, costly stones, some 10 cubits long and some 8 cubits long. Above these were high-grade stones, cut to size, and cedar beams. The great courtyard was surrounded by 3 rows of dressed stone and a row of trimmed cedar beams, as were the inner courtyard and portico of the house of the Lord. Now King Solomon sent to bring Huram from Tyre. He was the son of a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a craftsman in bronze. Huram had great skill, understanding, and knowledge for every kind of bronze work. So he came to King Solomon and carried out all his work. He cast 2 pillars of bronze, each 18 cubits high and 12 cubits in circumference. He also made 2 capitals of cast bronze to set on top of the pillars, each capital 5 cubits high. For the capitals on top of the pillars he made a network of lattice, with wreaths of chain work, 7 for each capital. Likewise, he made the pillars with 2 rows of pomegranates around each grating to cover each capital atop the pillars. And the capitals atop the pillars in the portico were shaped like lilies, 4 cubits high. On the capitals of both pillars, just above the rounded projection next to the network, were the 200 pomegranates in rows encircling each capital. Thus he set up the pillars at the portico of the temple. The pillar to the south he named Jachin, and the pillar to the north he named Boaz. And the tops of the pillars were shaped like lilies. So the work of the pillars was completed. He also made the sea of cast metal. It was circular in shape, measuring 10 cubits from rim to rim, 5 cubits in height, and 30 cubits in circumference. Below the rim, ornamental buds encircled it, 10 per cubit all the way around the sea, cast in 2 rows as a part of the sea. The sea stood on 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea rested on them, with all their hindquarters toward the center. It was a handbreadth thick, and its rim was fashioned like the brim of a cup, like a lily blossom. It could hold 2,000 baths. In addition, he made 10 movable stands of bronze, each 4 cubits long, 4 cubits wide, and 3 cubits high. This was the design of the stands. They had side panels attached to uprights, and on the panels between the uprights were lions, oxen, and cherubim. On the uprights was a pedestal above, and below the lions and oxen were wreaths of beveled work. Each stand had 4 bronze wheels with bronze axles and a basin resting on 4 supports, with wreaths at each side. The opening to each stand inside the crown at the top was 1 cubit deep, with a round opening like the design of a pedestal, a cubit and a half wide. And around its opening were engravings, but the panels of the stands were square, not round. There were 4 wheels under the panels, and the axles of the wheels were attached to the stand. Each wheel was a cubit and a half in diameter. The wheels were made like chariot wheels, their axles, rims, spokes, and hubs were all of cast metal. Each stand had 4 handles, 1 for each corner, projecting from the stand. At the top of each stand was a circular band half a cubit high. The supports and panels were cast as a unit with the top of the stand. He engraved cherubim, lions, and palm trees on the surfaces of the supports and panels, wherever each had space, with wreaths all around. In this way he made the 10 stands, each with the same casting, dimensions, and shape. He also made 10 bronze basins, each holding 40 baths and measuring 4 cubits across, 1 basin for each of the 10 stands. He set 5 stands on the south side of the temple and 5 on the north, and he put the sea on the south side, at the southeast corner of the temple. Additionally, Huram made the pots, shovels, and sprinkling bowls. So Huram finished all the work that he had undertaken for King Solomon in the house of the Lord, the 2 pillars, the 2 bowl-shaped capitals atop the pillars, the 2 sets of network covering both bowls of the capitals atop the pillars, the 400 pomegranates for the 2 sets of network. 2 rows of pomegranates for each network covering both the bowl-shaped capitals atop the pillars, the 10 stands, the 10 basins on the stands, the sea, the 12 oxen underneath the sea, and the pots, shovels, and sprinkling bowls. All the articles that Hiram made for King Solomon in the house of the Lord were made of burnished bronze. The king had them cast in clay molds in the plain of the Jordan between Sukkah and Zarethan. Solomon left all these articles unweighed, because there were so many. The weight of the bronze could not be determined. Solomon also made all the furnishings for the house of the Lord, the golden altar, the golden table on which was placed the bread of the presence, the lampstands of pure gold in front of the inner sanctuary, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left, the gold flowers, lamps, and tongs, the pure gold basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, ladles, and censers, and the gold hinges for the doors of the inner temple, that is, the most holy place, as well as for the doors of the main hall of the temple. So all the work that King Solomon had performed for the house of the Lord was completed. Then Solomon brought in the items his father David had dedicated, the silver, the gold, and the furnishings, and he placed them in the treasuries of the house of the Lord. Luke 20 verses 27 to 47. Then some of the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to question him. Teacher, they said, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife but no children, the man is to marry his brother's widow and raise up offspring for him. Now there were 7 brothers. The first one married a wife, but died childless. Then the second and the third married the widow, and in the same way all 7 died, leaving no children. And last of all, the woman died. So then, in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? For all 7 were married to her. Jesus answered, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy to share in the age to come and in the resurrection from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage. In fact, they can no longer die, because they are like the angels. And since they are sons of the resurrection, they are sons of God. Even Moses demonstrates that the dead are raised, in the passage about the burning bush. For he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for to him all are alive. Some of the scribes answered, Teacher, you have spoken well. And they did not dare to question him any further. Then Jesus declared, How can it be said that the Christ is the son of David? For David himself says in the book of Psalms, The Lord said to my Lord, Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. Thus David calls him Lord. So how can he be David's son? In the hearing of all the people, Jesus said to his disciples, Beware of the scribes. They like to walk around in long robes, and they love the greetings in the marketplaces, the chief seats in the synagogues, and the places of honor at banquets. They defraud widows of their houses, and for a show make lengthy prayers. These men will receive greater condemnation.